Harper Kensington's car door gave up on life in the middle of a gas station parking lot with a loud metallic groan and a final, defiant clunk, leaving her half in, half out of her vintage convertible like some kind of frozen mannequin. "Seriously," she muttered, yanking at the handle. The door didn't budge. She was wearing heels too high for this nonsense, sunglasses too expensive for this town, and patience that had worn thin somewhere back on the interstate. The sunlight glared off the cracked concrete. She was stuck. "Need help?" a deep voice asked. She looked up. The man walking toward her wore a faded gray t-shirt, jeans stained at the knees, and held a half-empty bottle of water. His hands were calloused. His hair was dark and messy, like he'd just run his fingers through it 100 times. And he had a kid maybe 6 years old perched on his hip, holding a bright red toy dinosaur. "I think the car door's protesting my existence," Harper said, trying to laugh it off. He crouched beside the car, gently setting the little boy down. "Let me take a look." "I'm good with stubborn doors." She stepped aside, watching as he examined the hinges and latch like he did this sort of thing every day. The kid sat on the curb, humming to himself and making the dinosaur eat invisible people. "I'm Harper," she offered, brushing her hands on her skirt. "Silas Vale," he said without looking up. "This is my son, Grayson." Grayson waved at her with the dinosaur. "He's a T-Rex. He eats mean people." Harper smiled. "Good, I like that kind of justice." Silas stood after a few minutes, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Latch is bent." "Probably from someone yanking it too hard. I can fix it if you've got a few minutes." "You're not secretly a mechanic, are you?" "Not secret at all," he said with a half grin. "I own the auto shop 2 blocks down, Vale's Garage. Of course, a single dad mechanic with an actual garage." Of all the places her car could betray her, it picked the one with a man who looked like he walked out of a small town calendar and smelled faintly of motor oil and cedarwood. She hesitated. "Are you sure? I could call roadside. Don't waste your time. I've got tools in the truck." "Grayson, you good to sit here?" Grayson nodded, busy making the dinosaur roar. Silas returned a minute later with a toolbox and got to work. Harper stood awkwardly nearby, watching him with mild fascination. His forearms flexed as he worked, and he whistled under his breath some old country song she didn't recognize. "So," he said, not looking up, "you from around here?" "Nope, just passing through." "Heading to Asheville, vacation," something like that. He glanced at her then, and she realized he was trying to figure her out quietly. Her outfit screamed money, and her car, while vintage, had been fully restored, down to the custom leather seats. She didn't look like someone who wandered into gas stations with broken doors. Harper didn't offer more details. She wasn't in the mood to explain that she owned a tech startup that recently sold for 8 figures, or that she needed to escape the swarm of investors, fake friends, and men who only saw dollar signs in her smile. She just wanted to breathe, somewhere real. "There," Silas said, snapping her back to reality. He stood and opened the door smoothly. "Fixed," she blinked. "That was fast. Not my first rogue door." Grayson ran up and clapped. "Yay, you saved her," Harper laughed. "You did, I owe you both," Silas shrugged. "You don't owe me anything." "Just glad I was here." She reached into her bag for her wallet. He shook his head. "Nope, don't insult me," she paused. "It's not an insult, it's gratitude. I don't charge people stranded in a parking lot with a bad latch." His eyes met hers. "But if you really want to thank me, come by the shop tomorrow. I'll make sure everything else on the door's solid." Harper hesitated. She had plans to keep driving. But something about the way he looked at her, like he actually saw her, not her heels or her sunglasses or the brand name on her purse, made her say, "Okay, I'll stop by." "Cool," he said, picking up Grayson in one fluid motion. "We'll be there." Harper watched them go, the father and son disappearing into a beat-up truck with a cracked windshield and a car seat in the back. The license plate read GVL Mech. She got back into her car and tried the door. It opened and shut perfectly. She exhaled. Something warm settled in her chest. Not excitement. Not nerves. Hope. The next morning, Harper found Vale's garage by following the smell of oil and the sound of classic rock playing from inside a wide open bay. Silas was under a car, legs sticking out from beneath a lifted truck. Grayson sat nearby on an old tire, coloring a page full of dragons. "Hey," Harper called. Silas slid out, wiping sweat from his forehead. You came. I said I would. You're already more reliable than half the people in this town, she smiled. Still offering that door check? Absolutely. He nodded toward the office. Give me 10 minutes, there's coffee inside. She stepped into the small office, surprised by how cozy it felt. There were pictures on the wall: Grayson as a baby, a younger Silas in a baseball jersey, and one of the two of them on a camping trip. When Silas joined her, he brought a paper towel and handed it to her like a gentleman offering a napkin in a 5-star restaurant. She took it with a laugh. You're good with people, she said. I'm better with cars, he replied, sipping from a mug that read World's Okayest Dad. They talked for a while about nothing, about everything. Harper learned his wife passed away 4 years ago. That he quit his job at a big dealership to raise Grayson in peace. That he liked working with his hands and hated small talk. She told him she was taking a break from work, which was true. She just didn't say what kind of work. By the time she left 2 hours later, Silas had not only checked her door but also tightened her brakes, replaced a worn belt, and insisted on giving the car a free tune-up. You really don't have to do all this, she said. I know, he replied. But I want to. She didn't know what to say to that, so she smiled and drove away, wondering why her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Harper stayed in town longer than she planned. She told herself it was the quiet, the mountains, the charm, but really it was Silas. They started seeing each other almost daily. Little things, coffee runs, walks after his shift, dinners at the diner where Grayson always ordered pancakes no matter the hour. Harper had never been so relaxed in her life. And Silas looked at her like she was just a woman, not a millionaire. It was the first time she didn't feel like a bank account with legs. One night, after walking her to her car, he paused. I like this, he said quietly. She looked up. Me too. He leaned down and kissed her, soft and slow, and for the first time in forever, Harper felt real, not curated. Not followed, not watched, just wanted, and she knew she was falling. Fast, Harper stood on the edge of the town's old bridge, watching the river rush beneath her. The wooden rail was smooth beneath her palms, worn by time and weather. She hadn't planned on coming here, but after spending the morning wandering the farmer's market and avoiding 3 phone calls from her investment advisor, she found herself drawn to the stillness. Didn't expect to find you here, Silas said from behind her. She turned, surprised. Is this your spot? He nodded, stepping beside her. Grayson and I come here sometimes. He likes to drop sticks in the water and race them from one side to the other. Says it helps him think. Harper smiled faintly. Maybe I should try that. Something on your mind, she hesitated. I've been trying to figure out how long I can keep pretending I'm just some woman on a road trip. Silas didn't press. He just leaned on the railing and looked out at the water. You don't owe this place a timeline. I know. But I'm starting to feel like I'm lying by omission. He glanced at her, his gaze steady. You're not lying if you're just choosing not to explain everything. That's generous of you. I don't care where you're from, Harper, or what you do. I care about who you are when you're here. She looked at him, then really looked. The faint scar on his jaw, the sun lines near his eyes, the relaxed way he carried himself, like nothing could shake him unless it threatened someone he loved. It terrified her how much she wanted to tell him everything, but she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she said, I haven't had a real conversation like this in years. He gave a soft laugh. Then you've been talking to the wrong people. That night, she found herself back at his place for dinner. Grayson greeted her in a pirate costume, complete with a wooden sword and an eye patch. I'm guarding the treasure, he declared, standing in the middle of the living room. And where's the treasure hidden? Harper asked. He narrowed one eye. Can't tell you. You might steal it. Silas walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He's been guarding a shoebox full of rocks and marbles for 3 days. Precious cargo, Harper said with a nod. Dinner was grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, simple and perfect. They ate on the back porch, the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the air. After Grayson was tucked in bed, Harper helped gather plates. Inside, she noticed a dusty guitar leaning against the wall near the fireplace. You play? Silas glanced over. Used to. Haven't in a while. Why not? He stacked the dishes in the sink. Some things get left behind when life demands something else. Do you miss it? He dried his hands and leaned against the counter. More than I let on. Harper crossed the room and picked up the guitar carefully, running her fingers along the strings. Play something. His eyes met hers, unreadable. You don't strike me as someone who likes country music. Try me. He took the guitar, sat down on the edge of the couch, and after a moment of hesitation, started playing. The chords were low and slow, the kind that made you feel like sitting quietly just to listen. His voice was rough, not polished, but it wrapped around the lyrics like they belonged to him. When he finished, Harper didn't clap. She just moved closer and whispered, "That was beautiful." He set the guitar down. It was honest. She sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. You should never stop doing things that make you feel like yourself. Silas turned toward her. What makes you feel like you? The question caught her off guard. She sat back, eyes on the ceiling. I used to think it was building something from nothing, creating something people needed. But lately, I don't know, you're allowed to change your answer. I'm afraid if I do, I'll lose what I built. Then maybe it wasn't built on the right things. That night, she drove back to the inn with her heart thudding in her chest. She hadn't told him about the money or the company, but he was already peeling back layers no one else had ever reached. The next day, he invited her to the town's community picnic. She almost said no events like that felt too exposed, but the way he asked, casual and hopeful, made her say yes. She wore jeans and sneakers and brought a peach cobbler she'd bought from a roadside stand. Grayson ran up to her with sticky fingers and a grass-stained shirt. "You made it," he shouted, hugging her waist. Silas followed behind him, holding 2 lemonades. "Didn't think you'd show. I needed a reason to wear shoes that don't pinch." They walked through the crowd together, and Harper noticed how many people greeted Silas like he was family. She saw how he offered to fix a neighbor's lawnmower, how he bent down to tie a kid's shoe, how he laughed with a woman running the grill like they were old friends. He was rooted here, solid, known, and she was a woman with one foot in a different world. Later, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned pink, she found herself sitting on a blanket beside him, watching Grayson chase fireflies. "Do you ever regret staying here?" she asked. Silas stretched out his legs. "Not once, even though you could have had more somewhere else. I have everything I need." She turned her head. "You're sure?" He looked at her, quiet for a beat. "I've learned that more doesn't always mean better. Peace is worth more than noise. Time with my son is worth more than any promotion. And people who see you for who you are matter more than people impressed by what you have." Harper swallowed hard. "You're not making it easy to keep pretending." "You don't have to pretend." Before she could respond, a woman approached them. Tall, blonde, with a clipboard and a sharp gaze. "Silas," she said smoothly. "I wasn't expecting you here." He stood up, his body tensing. Claire's eyes flicked to Harper. "This your new friend?" Harper offered a polite smile, but something in the woman's tone made her skin prickle. Silas nodded once. "Yeah." Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You always did have a thing for women passing through." Silas's jaw tightened. "That's enough, Claire, no offense," Claire said to Harper. "Just surprised." "You don't look like the usual crowd around here." Harper stood, calm but firm. "That's probably because I'm not." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Well, good luck." She walked off, heels clicking against the pavement. Harper turned to Silas. Ex-fiancé, her eyebrows lifted. "That was Frosty." "She's bitter. We ended things 2 years ago. She wanted something I couldn't give anymore." "What was that?" "Ambition. Flash. She hated that I chose this life." Harper looked after the disappearing figure. "She thinks I'm just like her. You're not." "She's not wrong about me being different from this town." Silas stepped closer. "Difference isn't a flaw, but secrets are." He frowned. "You want to tell me something?" She hesitated, heart pounding. "Not here." He didn't press, just nodded. "All right." Later, back at the inn, Harper opened her laptop for the first time in days. Her inbox had over 200 messages. Her CFO had forwarded a contract with the subject line, "Urgent merger finalization." She stared at it, then closed the laptop. Her past was knocking. But her future might be standing barefoot in a garage with a sleepy kid on his hip. She had to decide soon, because secrets had a way of turning into walls, and she wasn't sure how long Silas would wait on the other side. Rain spilled down in heavy sheets, drumming against the windows of Silas's garage as he leaned over Harper's car, tightening the bolts on a fresh set of brake pads. The storm had come in quickly, darkening the sky and trapping her there. She stood by the open bay door, arms crossed, watching the storm swallow the road. Her hair was damp from the dash inside, her jeans cuffed above her ankle boots. The garage lights buzzed overhead, casting a warm, golden glow that softened the gray gloom outside. "You're lucky you stopped by when you did," Silas said, glancing up from the wheel hub. "That front left pad was a day from grinding metal. Guess it's a good thing I'm cursed with bad car luck," she said, stepping closer. "You're not cursed," he replied, straightening with the socket wrench in his hand. "You just give me excuses to see you." The words landed between them like a challenge and a confession. Harper felt her heartbeat shift. "Is that the only reason you fix things for me?" "Not the only one," he said simply, wiping his hands on a towel. "But I'd be lying if I said it didn't cross my mind. I'm not used to people being this honest." "That doesn't surprise me." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because you walk like you're always bracing for someone to take advantage of you," he said, stepping back from the car. "Like you've had to learn to expect it." She didn't answer right away. The rain was thunder now, slamming against the metal roof in rhythmic waves. "You're not wrong," she said finally, "but you're the first person who said it out loud." Silas tossed the towel onto the workbench, then leaned his hip against the table. "You don't owe me your past, Harper, but I'm here if you want to stop running from it." Something in her cracked then. Not because of the words, but because of how gently he'd said them. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her key fob, pressing it until the trunk clicked. Walking over, she lifted it and pulled out a laptop wrapped in a leather sleeve. She set it down on the workbench and opened it. "Type my name into a search bar," she said, her voice quiet. Silas didn't move. "You sure?" She nodded. He hesitated, then stepped forward. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a breath before he typed. The results painted the truth in bold headlines and glossy magazine covers. Harper Kensington, youngest founder to lead a private tech company to $1 billion valuation. Harper Kensington, the elusive heiress of the Kensington media empire. Harper Kensington, the woman with the Midas touch. He stared at the screen for a long time. The thunder outside seemed to pull the silence tighter. When he finally looked at her, his expression didn't shift into awe or anger. It settled into something heavier. "You said you were passing through," he said. "I was, but you didn't say what you were running from. I wasn't sure you'd believe me. Try me." She leaned back against the workbench, arms folded across her chest. "I sold my company 6 months ago. I thought it would make me feel free, like I'd finally done it. Built something that changed things, but all it did was put a bigger target on my back. Everyone around me started seeing me as a prize or a threat. I didn't know who to trust anymore." Silas nodded slowly. "So you left." "I packed a bag, got in my car, and drove without a map. I thought I'd stop for a night or two. Then I met a man who fixed my car door and didn't ask for anything in return." Silas's gaze didn't waver. "You could have told me sooner." "I could have. But I didn't want you to look at me like everyone else does. I'm not everyone else, Harper. I know that now." He closed the laptop gently. "You didn't lie, but you kept part of yourself hidden. I was afraid it would change things. Did you think I'd care about the money?" "No," she said. "I thought you'd think I didn't belong here." He stepped toward her, the space between them shrinking. "I don't care where you come from. I care how you treat people. How you look at my son like he's more than background noise. How you make me feel like I'm not just the guy who stayed behind." Harper's voice caught. "I didn't mean to fall for you." "Then don't fight it." He kissed her. It wasn't the hesitant brush of lips they'd shared before. It was deep and sure, mouths opening with need, hands gripping fabric and skin, the kind of kiss that rewrites the air. When they parted, breathless, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "So what now?" he asked. Harper exhaled. "Now I figure out what it means to stay." The rain slowed to a steady patter. The power flickered, then held. Grayson's voice echoed down the hallway from the office where he was watching cartoons on an old TV. "Dad, the power went funny," Silas called back. "It's okay, buddy. We're still good." Harper smiled. "He's got your timing." "He's got my everything," Silas said, then turned back to her. "You sure you're ready for a life like this?" "I'm not afraid of small towns, Silas. I'm afraid of losing something real again." "Then let's not lose it." That night, she stayed. Not because of the storm, but because she didn't want to leave. They made dinner together in the modest kitchen, pasta tossed with whatever vegetables were left in the fridge. Grayson insisted on 3 forks in the pot, claiming it was cooler that way. They ate on the couch, a blanket over their laps, cartoons still playing in the background. When Grayson fell asleep against Harper's side, Silas lifted him gently and carried him to bed. Harper stood in the doorway, watching as he tucked the boy in. He brushed a hand over his son's hair, then turned to her. "He's never fallen asleep on anyone else," he said softly. Harper's chest tightened. "He makes it easy to stay still." Silas stepped out and closed the door behind him. "You do, too." They didn't sleep apart that night. In his room, under worn cotton sheets with rain still whispering at the windows, Silas kissed her again, slower this time, with reverence. When they lay tangled together afterward, the only sound was their breathing. "I don't know what I was waiting for," Harper whispered, curled against his chest. "You weren't ready," he said. "Now you are." She felt something settle inside her, a decision that had been waiting in the wings finally stepping into the spotlight. The next morning, she called her lawyer and told him to pull out of the merger. When he asked why, she said, "Because I don't want to be bought." She spent the rest of the day walking through town with Silas and Grayson. They stopped at the bookstore, where Grayson picked out a graphic novel about space pirates. They had lunch at a cafe where no one asked for her autograph. They sat on a bench near the school playground and watched kids chase each other through puddles. Harper had never felt more anonymous. Or more known. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows on the sidewalk, Silas handed her a folded piece of paper. She opened it to find a hand-drawn map. Crayon lines marked the route from his garage to a small cabin by a creek. "What's this?" "A place I've been fixing up," he said. "Used to belong to my grandfather. I was going to sell it, but now," she looked up. "I thought maybe you'd want a place to call your own," he said, "if you stayed." Harper folded the map slowly, her fingers trembling. "I don't want a place," she said. "I want a life." Silas didn't reply. He just pulled her into his arms, and Harper, for the first time in years, felt like she'd finally arrived. Silas stood at the cabin's front porch, hammer in hand, the scent of freshly cut cedar clinging to the cool mountain air. The sun was still crawling over the horizon, casting a golden haze across the clearing. He'd been up since before dawn, finishing the last touches on the railing and setting out the old rocking chairs he'd found buried in the garage attic. He wasn't a man who believed in signs. Not really, but something about this place felt like it had been waiting for her. The screen door creaked behind him. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor if you keep pacing," Harper said as she stepped outside, pulling her sweater tighter against the breeze. "I'm just making sure it's ready." "It's more than ready." Her voice wrapped around him like a thread, grounding and warm. She stood beside him, barefoot, her hair still damp from the shower. There was a quiet around them that didn't need filling. He handed her a mug of coffee, the handle still warm. "I couldn't sleep. Because of the cabin, because of you." She took a sip, eyes scanning the trees. "That's fair. I'm not exactly easy to plan for. No, but you're worth it." She breathed in the steam. "I don't think I've ever heard that without a condition attached." "Then I wasn't the first who deserved to tell you." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped down the porch steps and walked to the edge of the clearing where the creek ran fast and shallow. It hummed like background music, steady and real. "I got an offer yesterday," she called back to him, not turning around. Silas set his mug on the porch rail. "For what?" "To come on as a board advisor for a venture fund in San Francisco. They want my name, my face, and my signature." He joined her at the water's edge, the ground soft beneath their feet. "And what do you want?" "That's the part I can't answer yet. You could do it remotely. Fly out when necessary. Keep both." "I could," she said, glancing at him, "but I've never been good at splitting myself in half." Silas crouched to pick up a flat stone, weighing it in his palm. "You're allowed to want something different now. I don't think I've ever lived a life that didn't require me to be constantly impressive. You don't have to impress me, Harper." "I know," she said, softer now, "and that's what scares me. You make it feel too easy." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "I don't want easy, I want honest." She stared at him, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes. "Then I need to ask you something." "All right." If I wasn't who I am, if I didn't have any of it, would this still be real? Silas didn't move. It was real before I knew, it's real now, and it'll still be real tomorrow. Her shoulders eased. Okay. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. That afternoon, the town's fall festival painted the streets with color. Banners fluttered from lampposts, booths spilled with handmade crafts and warm cider, and fiddles played somewhere near the courthouse steps. Harper stood with Grayson near the pumpkin carving contest, watching him proudly display a crooked, one-eyed creation he'd insisted was a dragon. "This is the best day ever," he declared, cheeks sticky with caramel. "I think you say that every time there's sugar involved," she teased. Silas joined them carrying 2 paper bags of kettle corn. "I've never seen that many pumpkins lose their dignity in one place." Grayson beamed. "Did mine win?" "I think yours scared the judges too much to say no." Harper caught Silas's hand without thinking. It felt natural now, second nature. But the moment stilled when she noticed Claire standing across the street, arms folded, talking to a man in a tailored vest with a tablet in his hand. Claire's eyes flicked toward them, and then back to her companion, who glanced at Harper with a slightly startled double-take. Harper tensed. Silas followed her gaze. "You know him. His name's Ezra. He works for my former board. He's not here for the cider." "What's he want?" "Likely to remind me that I'm supposed to be in Manhattan signing contracts." Silas stepped closer. "You want to leave?" "No," she said. "But I think I need to deal with it." She walked across the street without hesitation. Ezra turned as she approached, his face smoothing into a polite but calculating smile. "Harper," he said, "didn't expect to find you here, clearly. We've been trying to reach you. Your team said you were off-grid." "I was." "Well, the fund is moving forward with or without your signature. We'd prefer with. You're an asset." "Funny, I stopped wanting to be an asset." Ezra blinked. "What's going on?" She glanced behind her at Silas and Grayson, who were watching from a distance. "What's going on is I found something I don't want to walk away from." "Are you saying no?" "I'm saying I'm not for sale anymore." Ezra hesitated. "Should I tell them that's your final answer?" "Yes. You're really staying here." "I am." He looked at her like she'd just announced she was moving to the moon. "All right, I'll let them know." She turned and walked away without another word. When she reached Silas, he looked at her with quiet pride. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think I've never been more okay." That night, Silas lit the fireplace in the cabin while Harper set out plates on the old pine table he'd restored. Grayson was already asleep in the loft upstairs, curled under a quilt with his dragon coloring book beside him. Silas poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. "Now that you're officially not leaving," he said, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her brow lifted. "Is this where you tell me there's a catch to the cabin?" "No catch." He pulled a small box from his back pocket, her breath caught. "Before you open it," he said, "I need you to know something." She waited. "I'm not asking you to marry me because of who you are or what you've done. I'm asking because I've watched you become part of every day that matters, because you make this life feel full, and because I love you." Her hands trembled as she took the box and opened it. Inside was a ring handcrafted from brushed gold, the band etched with the faintest outline of a tree. "It's from a local artist," he said. "I didn't want anything flashy. I wanted something that meant rooted." She couldn't speak. "Harper Kensington," he said, "will you stay with me, build something here with me and Grayson?" "Not because you have to, but because you want to." She looked at him, at the firelight dancing across his face, at the man who had never once treated her like a commodity, a brand, or a title. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He let out a breath, and then he kissed her with everything he had. They didn't wait for a crowd or a ceremony. The wedding came 2 weeks later, in the clearing behind the cabin. There were no velvet chairs or designer gowns, just a ring of wildflowers and the people who'd come to matter. Grayson insisted on walking her down the path. He wore a tie that was slightly too long and held her hand like it was the most important job in the world. Silas waited barefoot, his shirt sleeves rolled, his eyes never leaving hers. When they said their vows, it wasn't with practiced words or pages of promises. It was simple. "I choose you," Harper said. "I choose you," Silas replied. They kissed, and the trees swayed like they approved. Later, as twilight fell and music played from an old record player on the porch, Harper leaned into Silas's side, her hand resting on his heart. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. He kissed her temple. "Not even in my best dreams." She looked out at the creek, now glowing with lantern light. "You fixed my door, and somehow everything else followed." "I didn't fix you," he said. "No," she agreed, "but you helped me remember how to be whole." They danced under the stars, Grayson asleep in a chair nearby, the night holding them like a secret that no longer needed hiding. And in that moment, with bare feet on old wood and laughter echoing into the trees, Harper knew she hadn't just fallen in love with a man. She'd found a life, one that no fortune could ever buy. The sound of hammers had long since faded. Now the cabin was filled with the quiet rhythm of life, the kettle whistling, the pages of a book turning, Grayson's pencil scratching across paper as he drew at the kitchen table. Outside, the autumn trees had begun to shed their leaves in earnest, their branches flickering amber and rust as the wind teased them loose. Harper stood by the window, a mug of tea warming her hands. She watched as Silas crossed the yard, a tarp slung over one shoulder and a coil of rope in the other. He was building a woodshed behind the cabin, and despite her offer to help, he insisted she stay inside where it was warm. She hadn't argued. Not because she minded the cold, but because she'd learned to choose her battles. Grayson looked up from his drawing pad. "Is Daddy gonna build a slide on the woodshed?" Harper turned. "I think he's focused on firewood right now." "Yeah, but it would be cooler if it had a slide," he said, tongue between his teeth as he added a dragon to the corner of the page. "And a telescope." She walked over and crouched beside him. "Maybe you should draw it the way you think it should look." "Then you can show him," he glanced at her. "You think he'd build it like that? I think he'd try." Grayson grinned, then bent back over the page, fully invested in his blueprint. When Silas returned, his hands were red from the cold and his jacket was dusted with sawdust. He leaned in to kiss Harper's cheek, then ruffled Grayson's hair on his way to the sink. "I think your son has plans to turn the shed into a space observatory," Harper said. Silas glanced over his shoulder as he washed his hands. "Of course he does." "Last week it was a pirate fort. Dragons need a place to land," Grayson added. Silas dried his hands with a dish towel. "We'll see what we can do." Later that night, after Grayson had fallen asleep with a flashlight still on beneath his blanket, Harper curled up beside Silas on the couch. The fire was low, casting long shadows on the walls. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the slow beat of his heart. "I talked to my mother yesterday," she said. Silas shifted, brushing his fingers along her arm. "How'd that go?" she asked why I hadn't flown back for the gallery opening. "She thinks I'm having a midlife crisis." "Are you?" "No," she said, tracing a circle on his shirt. "But I think I'm finally living a life that belongs to me." "That makes people uncomfortable. Do you miss it?" "Sometimes, but not the way I thought I would. I miss the challenge, not the chaos." "You could always start something new," he said. "On your terms." "I've been thinking about that. A mentorship program maybe. For women starting out in tech or business, something local, quiet, real." Silas looked down at her. "That sounds like something this town could use. I don't want to create something that pulls me away again." "Then don't. Let it fit into your life, not the other way around." She tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "Have I told you lately how much I love you?" "Not in the last hour," he said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "I love you," she whispered. He kissed her, slow and sure, and everything else in the world faded to the background. The next morning, Harper woke to the smell of cinnamon and the sound of Silas and Grayson in the kitchen, whispering in conspiratorial tones. She slipped on a robe and padded out of the bedroom, stopping when she saw the table. It was set with pancakes shaped like stars, mugs of hot cocoa, and a single wildflower in a mason jar. Grayson looked up and beamed. "We made breakfast, but don't sit down yet." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because Daddy said wait until he says the thing." She turned to Silas, who stood by the counter, holding something behind his back. Despite the flour on his shirt and the cocoa powder on his knuckles, his eyes were steady and clear. "I know we're not flashy people," he said. "And I know we already built a life without needing a ceremony to prove it. But I want more." Harper's breath caught. I want to wake up every day knowing you chose me, not just once, but always. I want our son to know that love doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. And I want you to know that no matter what your past holds, no matter what you build next, I'll be here." He stepped forward and opened his hand. In his palm was a ring simple, elegant, and unmistakably hers. "Will you marry me, Harper Kensington?" "Not because we need to, but because I want to spend every day choosing you." Grayson bounced in place. "Say yes." Harper stared at the ring, then at the man who had become her home. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Yes, I will." Grayson threw his arms around her waist. "Now can we eat the pancakes?" They married in early spring. The ceremony was small, just as they wanted. Wildflowers bloomed across the clearing behind the cabin, and the creek ran fast and clear from the winter melt. Silas wore a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled, and Harper wore a dress that swayed when she walked, barefoot through the grass. Grayson stood between them, holding their hands while the town's mayor, who had once been Silas's high school science teacher, officiated with misty eyes. There were no photographers, no flower walls, no invitations printed on expensive cardstock, but there was laughter. There was music. There was love, and it was the kind that didn't need to be broadcast to be real. Afterward, they danced barefoot in the yard while neighbors clapped and someone played guitar. Harper held Silas close, her head resting on his shoulder, and whispered, "I've never felt more like myself." He kissed the top of her head. "That's all I ever wanted for you." Seasons passed, and so did the noise from the outside world. Harper's mentorship program grew slowly, just the way she wanted. She hosted workshops at the local library, helped women in the area start their own businesses, and even partnered with the high school to sponsor internships. She never put her name on the banners. She didn't need to. Silas expanded the garage, took on 2 apprentices, and still closed early on Fridays to walk Grayson home from school. Their evenings were filled with family dinners, board games, and the crackle of the fireplace. Sometimes Harper would wake up in the middle of the night, just to watch the moonlight spill across Silas's face as he slept, his arm draped over her waist. And she'd feel it, that quiet certainty that she'd found the only thing that had ever truly mattered. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch as fireflies lit the trees. Grayson was up in the loft, reading a book about space colonists and futuristic dragons. Silas leaned back in his chair, his hand finding hers. "You ever think about what might have happened if your car door hadn't broken?" she smiled. "Every day. And I think fate knew what it was doing." He looked over at her, eyes soft. "I don't believe in fate. You don't have to. I believe enough for both of us." He pulled her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "You think this is it, the forever kind?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." And as the stars blinked awake above the trees, Harper Kensington Vale knew she had finally built something unshakable. Not a company, not a legacy, but a life, and it was hers, completely.